Welcome back to the Single Malt Review. In our last episode, Tim looked at a pair of Aberlours, chill filtered versus unchill filtered. Carrying on in a similar vein this week, in fact exactly the same vein, looking at the two whiskies again, but with more of a blind tasting for me this time, just to get even more of an insight into, well, what's it like, filtered versus unfiltered. Now, I have a fond history with Aberlour. The very first cask strength whisky I ever had was an Aberlour Aberlours some years ago, and they're one of the delightfully consistent and enjoyable Speyside drams. So, I've tried both these whiskies in the past, but for purposes of this exercise, I'm going to be trying them both blind, as it were. I won't know which is in each of our anonymised coloured glasses here. They're going to be both filled, diluted down to roughly the same strength. As we know, the chill filtered whisky here is bottled at 40%, and the unchill filtered at 48. We're going to take those both down to just below 40, so both had some water added, brought down to the same strength. I'm going to try them both, see which one I like best, and try to hazard a guess as to which I think is the chill filtered expression and which is the unchill filtered expression. Now, as a general rule, I would normally go for an unfiltered whisky. It feels more pure, perhaps more honest, more, at least, if not honest, then more of the original expression, whatever has come straight out of the barrel into the bottle, with less being done to it. But at the same time, sometimes you may simply want a clearer, unclouded whisky with a clearer, unclouded flavour, with fewer things happening, some more kind of bold individual flavours instead of the medley of colourful cloudiness you can get from an unfiltered whisky. Individual taste, what works for one whisky may not work for another whisky. What works for one whisky fan may not work for another whisky fan. All that aside, let's get some whisky into these glasses.
We'll be right back.
Two whiskies, both alike in dignity, on fair kitchen table where we lay our scene. But which one is chill filtered? And more importantly, which one do I like more? I have no idea, so let's give it a go. Now, as Tim mentioned previously, despite both being 12-year-old Aberlours, they're quite possibly very different casks have gone into these two whiskies, so they're spiritually similar, but the actual substance may differ quite a bit. So, leaving aside the chill filtration, there may be some fundamental differences anyway. But let's investigate. First, whiskey A. Some spicy, fruity notes. Decent amount of spirit. Warming, prickly, grapefruity, pineapple-y, very tropical. I'm pleased. Whiskey B. Softer, more mellow nose. Less spiritus fire there. A little more of a stewed or more syrupy fruit nose to it. And that carries over into the body as well. Richer, yet warmer and a bit spicier. More stewed fruit, more of a fruit pudding, desserty flavour. They're both very good, but they're very good in different ways. There's a little more of almost a Highlandy character in Whiskey A, whereas Whiskey B is possibly, at least from my experience, a bit more classically Speyside. But I'll need to try again. Get some food for ideas there. Whiskey A seems to have a slightly thinner body. It feels like it's a bit lighter, almost like a slightly younger spirit. Even though both exactly 12 years old, we know that. Whiskey B is heavier, more robust, bigger in a sense. I'd say I like Whiskey B a bit more. I do like sweet fruits, which Whiskey A has in abundance. Whiskey B just has a richness and a darkness which appeals to me quite a lot. In terms of which I think is filtered or not, well, I'm not going to look too closely at them. Thankfully, clouded glass, I can't get any hints from cloudiness or lack thereof in the whisky itself. But if I were to hazard a guess, I would assume that Whisky A is the chill filtered whiskey, because their steam is possibly to be a little less depth and richness, like something has been taken away from it, maybe. This is assuming they were both identical whiskies to begin with, which we know they aren't. Whereas Whisky B has a heft and body to it, which my mind says was not filtered. It's all straight out of the bottle. I like them both. They've got lots of good points. They're both very, very nice single malts. But, anyway, let's see how I did. So, here's my guesses. Not filtered, Whisky A. Pardon me. Filtered in Whisky A. Not filtered in Whisky B. So, let's get Tim back on and see how I have done. Okay, so in my guess, Whisky A, lighter, sweeter, more spirit-driven, and therefore, according to my preconceptions, chill-filtered. There's Whisky B, more stewed and syrupy, weighty, not filtered. How did I do?
Well, in this case, you've managed to get them around the wrong way. Whisky A is, in fact, the unchill-filtered version, as it's now just beginning to show its character if you peer in the top with that telltale cloudiness. Always a way of noticing. You were very disciplined not to peer down the top, or the game would have been entirely given away. So, not exactly right on those. But what's interesting is you came to, regardless of which one you thought you were tasting, some quite consistent conclusions, which I myself drew. The Whisky A, unchill filtered, has for whatever reason, there is a distinct note of young, almost immature spirit to it. It seems far more, maybe not raw, but far more youthful, more vibrant, and as a result, slightly rougher than the chill-filtered version. And I'm sticking to my guns on this one. I think there is older whiskey in the chill-filtered version, the classic version, and I think it's older sherry casks that have gone in. Putting old sherry casks in blends, well, single malt blends, is very, very common practice for top dressing, because that whiskey, though it's sort of very precious these days, it's very, very expensive to get those casks and to age that whiskey all the way up there. That older sherry whiskey really does give a great roundness and a great richness to single malt whiskey, or blended whiskey for that matter, and that is really what the Whisky B has, which Whisky A lacks, what I thought. So, fairly interesting stuff. Goes to show that it's fairly difficult, even for more or less experienced tasters like us. It's not absolutely easy to pick out an unchill filtered whiskey from a chill filtered one by taste alone. Obviously, when you can actually look at it and analyse how it reacts to water, that process becomes a bit more prescriptive. But that's really not how people enjoy their whiskey. They don't drink it with their eyeballs. Really, it's just the nose and the mouth that are the ones in play for malt whiskey drinking. So that doesn't really do you a lot of good. So I suppose that's all. At the end of the day, fairly promising for people that were maybe a little worried that they were missing out on a great deal with their unchill filtered whiskey that they'd ended up with. I still think me and Dave are both of the opinion that unchill filtered whiskey is better because there's simply more there. There's more to enjoy, at least in potentia. But this has proven that although these bottles are far from analogous, I think the blends are, the more we taste these, the more I believe that the blends are quite disparate in these two bottles. Quite different source whiskies have gone in. But nonetheless, it's certainly perfectly possible to prefer a chill filtered whiskey, if that's what simply tastes better to you. So the advice I would draw from this is know what you like first. Don't be too judgmental or prejudiced against chill filtered whiskies. They are probably something that's on the way out, not on the way in, finally, and I think that is still a good thing. But don't let that stop you from enjoying them. Don't be too hip with your whiskey appreciation to exclude those, because there are some very, very good ones still out there. I'll take a look at a few in coming videos, I'm sure. But at any rate, unless you have anything further on our two Aberlours...
Well, I just think this has been a fine exercise in challenging preconceptions. The only way we can make this more of a chill-filtered versus unchill-filtered comparison is to have two identical expressions from the same cask, more or less, one filtered, one not. That would be difficult. It would be great to know if it's possible, if the option is out there. But as it goes, I knew that one of these came out of the bottle at a higher strength. I knew one of these was chill-filtered, the other wasn't. And based on that, all my preconceptions and prejudices about what makes a whiskey good or bad, they came into play and steered me in particular directions. I was completely wrong, because as similar as these whiskies are, they're different enough to each have their very own character. So it's good to know that, bias, prejudice, personal opinion comes so much into what you enjoy or don't enjoy. On the plus side, I liked both of these. I just liked them in different ways.
Yes, indeed. I think as thorough as we have tried to be with this one, I may hazard to be even more thorough in a future episode, because with my access to a laboratory, I might do a bit of real whiskey experimentation and see if I can myself chill filter a whiskey on my own and see what the result is I end up with there. Then I will finally have something truly analogous. I might see what I can do regards to home chill filtering a whiskey, which is probably something that has never happened, but it will. So look for that one coming up, and we will finally answer the question, or not. We will just have to. So it'll be a fascinating exercise regardless. But until then, happy experimentations of your own. Stay safe. Until next time, this has been the Single Malt Review. I do hope you've enjoyed it. Slanger, what have I got? Oh, it's the unchill filtered. Delightful.